Welcome to a brand new deep dive. Today, we're turning our attention to someone who is essentially the ultimate literary bad boy of the 16th and 17th century.
Yeah, that is definitely one way to describe him.
I mean, he was. We're talking about Ben Jonson. Our mission today is to really dig into his wild life, his groundbreaking psychological theories, and of course, his darkest, most savage comedic masterpiece.
Right, which is Volpone. It's a subject that really demands a deep critical lens, especially if you want to understand the transition from the Elizabethan to the Jacobean era.
And if you are listening to this right now and wondering why you should care about a Jacobean playwright, well, if you've ever dealt with modern hustle culture or watched people do just terrible things for money, or even wondered why certain personalities act so predictably out of control, this deep dive is going to feel incredibly relevant to you.
Absolutely. Jonson was an absolute titan of his day. He had this formidable classical erudition that put him right at the center of London's literary ecosystem.
Yeah, you hear all those stories about the legendary pub debates at the Mermaid Tavern, right? The ones between him and William Shakespeare.
Exactly. Observers at the time famously compared Jonson to a heavily armed Spanish galleon.
A Spanish galleon.
Right, because he was built on this vast learning and rigid classical structure. And he'd be going toe-to-toe in these debates with Shakespeare, who they characterized as a lighter, more nimble English man of war.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because that Spanish galleon metaphor, it implies this sort of stuffy, aristocratic, privileged scholar, which completely contradicts Jonson's actual lived experience.
Oh, completely. His origins were incredibly humble.
Yeah, he was born posthumously to a clergyman in 1572, and then within a couple of years, his mother married a bricklayer.
Which meant Jonson was raised in that trade.
A profession he absolutely despised, by the way. But he somehow managed to get an education at Westminster School under the great antiquarian William Camden.
Right, and Jonson later said quite plainly that he owed all that I'm in arts to Camden's rigorous classical grounding.
But the money ran out, didn't it?
It did. The tension between his intellectual capacity and his socioeconomic reality was just profound. Poverty forced him out of his formal education, so he couldn't go on to Oxford or Cambridge.
He was literally pulled right back into bricklaying.
Yeah, creating this massive psychological friction. You have this young man with unparalleled literary ambitions relegated to manual labor.
And that friction just exploded into what we can only call an action hero youth. I mean, he joined the army, deployed to Flanders, and famously engaged an enemy soldier in single combat.
It killed him.
Killed him and stripped him of his spoils.
Which really sets a precedent for a remarkably combative life.
To put it mildly, once he returned to London and got into the theater, that pugnacious temperament didn't just go away. It found new outlets.
Highly illegal outlets.
Yes. In 1597, he was thrown in prison for his involvement in a play called The Isle of Dogs.
The Privy Council condemned it as seditious and scandalous.
And then, even crazier, just a year later, in 1598, he killed an actor named Gabriel Spencer in a duel.
And he found himself facing the gallows.
So how does a bricklayer-turned-actor escape the hangman's noose for murder?
Well, this is a testament to the specific legal loopholes of the era and really his education under Camden. Jonson claimed benefit of clergy.
Meaning he could read Latin?
Exactly. He relied on his ability to read a Latin psalter to prove his literacy and escape the executioner.
He did have to forfeit his property, though, and they branded his thumb as a convicted felon.
A literal brand.
Mm.
And during that same stint in prison, he converted to Roman Catholicism, which was a highly dangerous religious affiliation in post-Reformation England.
If you look at that rap sheet sedition, murder, a branded thumb, a treasonous religious conversion, it paints a picture of a guy operating on the absolute extreme fringes of society.
Yet he simultaneously demanded ultimate authority in the literary world.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Jonson's aggressive posturing and that supreme confidence generated lifelong rivalries.
He was always fighting with somebody.
Always. He had a distinctly combative literary persona. He frequently attacked his contemporaries and vehemently defended his own dramaturgical principles.
Which ended up hurting his legacy, right?
Unfortunately, yes. That combative legacy provided ammunition for later generations of critics. The 19th century Romantics, who essentially canonized Shakespeare as this infallible deity of drama, they weaponized Jonson's temperament against him.
They framed him not as a brilliant structuralist, but just as Shakespeare's jealous, pedantic rival.
Exactly. They punished Jonson for his rigid adherence to classical rules and his refusal to embrace romanticism.
But framing it as a rivalry where Jonson was simply failing to be Shakespeare completely misses the point of what Jonson was actually trying to do.
He had zero interest in replicating Elizabethan romantic drama.
None at all. He looked at the popular trends, the magic, the fairies, the sprawling plots that leap across decades and oceans, and he thought it was all fundamentally absurd.
He wanted something entirely different.
He championed what he called vital realism. He explicitly stated his goal was to portray deeds and language such as men do use.
Such as men do use, meaning the actual people in the streets of London.
Right. He wanted the theater to be a rigorous moral laboratory.
And that desire for vital realism led directly to his popularization of the comedy of humors.
Okay, so let's break that down because the humors were originally a medical concept.
Right, the ancient Galenic medical theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, choler, and bile. The idea was that the equilibrium of these fluids kept you healthy and balanced.
And if you had an excess of one fluid, it caused a specific temperament. Like, too much phlegm makes you phlegmatic. Too much choler makes you choleric or angry.
Exactly. But what Jonson did, which was genuinely groundbreaking for character psychology on the stage, was he weaponized that biological concept into a dramaturgical tool.
He adapted it so that a humor wasn't just a temporary mood.
No, it became a defining, peculiar quality that draws all of a person's affections, spirits, and powers into one singular, inescapable direction. It becomes an obsession.
Which brings up a very common critique of Jonson's work. When you reduce a character to a singular, overriding obsession, whether that's greed, jealousy, or vanity, don't you run the risk of creating flat, one-dimensional figures?
It's a fair question, but the sources address this by comparing Jonson's methodology to George Bernard Shaw's approach centuries later.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
It is. The argument is that Jonson wasn't failing to write complex characters. He was doing it on purpose. He was deliberately stripping away irrelevant psychological nuances to achieve a laser-focused satiric impact.
So it wasn't about creating lifeless puppets.
No, that is a crucial distinction. Jonson is not trying to map the boundless, contradictory internal landscape of a Hamlet. He is executing a deliberate reduction of detail. By removing the sympathetic, messy complexities of human nature, he creates these brilliant, sharp caricatures.
It lets the audience examine a specific vice under a microscope.
Precisely. It's a highly calculated, engineered form of characterization designed to dissect social and moral decay.
And that engineered dissection reaches its absolute zenith in his Jacobean masterpiece, Volpone.
First performed around 1605 or 1606.
The timing of this play is a fascinating paradox in itself. He wrote his darkest, most cynical, savage comedy during a period of immense personal success.
King James I was on the throne, and Jonson was highly favored at court.
He was essentially serving as an unofficial poet laureate, writing these lavish, incredibly expensive masks for the royal family.
That from that position of extreme comfort, he delivers a merciless indictment of human greed.
So let's get into the play itself.
What's fascinating here is the precise mechanics of the plot Jonson constructed to deliver that indictment. Volpone centers entirely on the ancient Roman custom of captatio.
Legacy hunting?
Legacy hunting. Jonson realized that to make the extreme, almost pathological greed of his characters credible to his audience, he needed the perfect setting.
He couldn't just set it in a regular London neighborhood.
No, he chose Venice. In the Jacobean imagination, Venice was the absolute epicenter of fabulous affluence, sophisticated commerce, and luxurious vice.
It was a world where morality was completely subordinate to profit. The ideal petri dish for a play about unrestrained cupidity.
And the premise he sets up in Venice is brilliantly simple, but it yields endless complexity.
You have this wealthy, childless Venetian grandee, Volpone. He pretends to have a terminal illness.
He feigns being on his deathbed specifically to draw in a swarm of greedy legacy hunters.
They all shower him with extravagant gifts because each one of them believes that their present is going to secure their spot as his sole heir.
And to really underscore the dehumanizing nature of this pursuit, Jonson employs a sophisticated system of animal nomenclature. It goes far beyond clever punning.
It shows how greed literally strips away your humanity.
Exactly. Greed reduces us to pure predatory instinct. So you have Volpone, which means the fox. He's cunning, wealthy, orchestrating the whole deception from his den.
Then you have his servant and co-conspirator, Mosca.
The flesh fly, representing the parasitic nature of the con.
And circling around them both are the legacy hunters, who are modeled entirely on birds of prey.
There's Voltor, the vulture,
Corbaccio the Raven.
and Corvino the Gore Crow.
It's just brilliant. Act 1 establishes this atmosphere immediately. It presents this topsy-turvy universe where ordinary moral values are completely inverted.
The play opens with a mock liturgy. Volpone is literally worshiping his gold as a divine entity.
He treats his wealth not as a tool for living, but as the supreme creator of all value.
And once that philosophical baseline is established, Volpone retreats to his sickbed, dons his disguises, and Mosca starts ushering in the vulture, the raven, and the crow.
It's like a waiting room for terrible people.
It really is. And while greed is undeniably the foundational humor driving the narrative, Jonson skillfully weaves all 7 deadly sins into Volpone's sick room.
It's a masterful dance macabre.
We see profound pride in the legacy hunters. They're so arrogant about their own shrewdness and their legal maneuvering that they're entirely blind to the fact that they're the ones being conned.
We see sloth embodied in Mosca's proud parasitism. He views honest labor as beneath his intellect.
And we see wrath violently manifest in Corvino, who is defined by his volatile, frenzied jealousy.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting, because Jonson continually raises the stakes. He asks the audience to observe just how much of their humanity these birds of prey will discard for the promise of gold.
He uses the merchant Corvino, the crow, to demonstrate how a singular obsessive humor can completely override other deeply ingrained character traits.
Corvino is a man consumed by pathological marital jealousy regarding his virtuous wife, Celia. He threatens to murder her just for dropping a handkerchief out a window to a street performer.
But the moment Mosca suggests that the dying Volpone requires a young woman in his bed as a restorative, and that whoever provides this woman will definitively secure the inheritance, Corvino's jealousy instantly evaporates.
It is entirely replaced by his cupidity. The psychological pivot is genuinely terrifying.
It is. He physically drags Celia to Volpone's bed, threatening her with ruin and violence if she fails to comply. He is eager to prostitute his own wife to a dying man.
And Jonson mirrors this complete subversion of natural bonds with Corbaccio, the ancient deaf raven.
Mosca manipulates Corbaccio into legally disinheriting his own virtuous son, Bonario. He convinces the old man that giving his estate to Volpone will prompt Volpone to leave everything to him.
It's a total collapse of familial instinct. You have an old man on the absolute brink of death willing to destroy his own bloodline just to hoard wealth he will never live to spend.
And this total moral rot culminates in Act 4 during the scrutinio scene, which is the Venetian court trial.
Because Bonario actually happens to rescue Celia from Volpone's assault, and he brings the truth to the authorities.
But Jonson refuses to give us a clean, righteous resolution.
Oh, absolutely not.
Instead, he delivers a scathing indictment of the justice system. When faced with the exposure of the con, the legacy hunters do not repent. They close ranks.
Volpone, the lawyer, uses his formidable rhetorical skill to weave this massive web of perjury.
The vulture, the raven, and the crow unite with the fox and the fly to protect their potential investments. They systematically dismantle the truth.
They actually convince the magistrates that the innocent Bonario and Celia are guilty of adultery and attempted murder.
The Venetian judiciary is portrayed as structurally incompetent, completely easily swayed by theatricality and legal obfuscation.
So the innocents are condemned and the guilty walk free. And honestly, if the play ended right there, it would be a pure tragedy.
It would.
Yeah.
But Volpone's ultimate downfall comes from within his own psychological makeup.
Because his dominant trait isn't actually just the accumulation of wealth, is it?
No, it is the intellectual thrill of the deception itself. He's drunk on his triumph in the scrutinio. He cannot simply retire with his spoils. He feels this overwhelming compulsion to twist the knife, to witness the devastation of the legacy hunters firsthand.
It's the classic hubris of the overreaching mastermind. He overplays his hand.
He takes the fatal step of officially fating his own death and legally naming his parasite, Mosca, as his sole heir.
Just to torture them, he conceals himself to watch Volpone, Corbaccio, and Corvino arrive to claim their prize.
Only to find the flesh fly, wearing the robes of a Venetian grandee, coldly taking inventory of the estate.
The reversal is just a masterstroke of dramatic irony. The parasite formally becomes the host.
Mosca recognizes the legal reality of his new position and simply locks Volpone out of his own home.
Volpone is disguised as a minor court official, and he realizes he is completely trapped within the architecture of his own con.
And that double cross forces all of them back into the scrutinio for a final reckoning.
In that final courtroom confrontation, Mosca maintains the lie. He refuses to recognize his former master.
He calculates that he can just allow Volpone to be dragged off to punishment while he retains the vast fortune.
So Volpone is faced with an agonizing binary choice. Accept defeat and allow his creation to usurp him, or detonate the entire scheme and bring everyone down.
He chooses destruction.
In a moment, the text's referred to as the uncasing of the fox. Volpone publicly unmasks himself right in the center of the court.
He confesses the entirety of the plot. He exposes his own crimes, Mosca's double cross, and the depravity of all the legacy hunters.
And the resulting judgments handed down by the Venetian magistrates are brutal.
They are not the light, restorative wrist slaps you typically see in a romantic comedy. They are severe and meticulously tailored to the specific nature of each character's vice.
Right, so Volpone, who feigned a debilitating illness for profit, is sentenced to be chained in a hospital for incurables until his body actually mirrors the infirmity he mocked.
Mosca is whipped and condemned to a life of hard labor in the gallows.
Voltaire is permanently disbarred.
Corbaccio is stripped of his wealth, which is transferred to his son, and he is confined to a monastery.
And Corvino is publicly humiliated. He's rode through the Grand Canal wearing the ears of an ass.
The severity of that conclusion could easily tip the play into bleakness. But Jonson brilliantly mitigates this through a parallel, purely comedic subplot involving an English knight, Sir Politic Woodby.
We have to talk about Sir Politic. Because while Volpone embodies dangerous, corrosive vice, Sir Politic embodies harmless, vacuous folly.
He is desperate to be seen as this sophisticated Machiavellian schemer. He's constantly babbling about grandiose intelligence plots and technological inventions.
He's simply mimicking the corrupt environment of Venice without possessing any actual malice.
And the structural genius of the Sir Politic subplot lies in how perfectly it mirrors the main narrative's trajectory.
He eventually gets caught up in a harmless prank where he is convinced he's about to be arrested for treason.
And to evade capture, he hides beneath a massive, cumbersome tortoise shell of his own invention.
He's literally crawling across the floor in a desperate attempt to blend in. It is a stunning visual metaphor.
While Volpone, the apex predator, engineers a scheme that permanently traps him in an actual physical prison, Sir Politic, the wannabe schemer, traps himself inside a ridiculous, self-constructed shell.
Both men are ultimately imprisoned by their own defining humors, but the consequences scale perfectly with the severity of their moral failings. We laugh at the tortoise, but we are terrified by the fox.
This raises an important question regarding Jonson's ultimate theoretical goals with the comedy of humors. His avowed aim was fiercely didactic. He believed that true comedy must not only laugh at harmless follies, but must rigorously expose and punish actual moral crimes.
Which brings us to the ultimate genius of Ben Jonson. He was a man who lived a life of brawls and extreme scholarly rigor, and he looked at human nature, stripped away all the romantic fluff, and showed us the animalistic reality of unchecked greed.
And that balance is exactly why Volpone maintains its staggering power today. The linguistic density, the classical structure, and the psychological reductionism all serve to force the audience to confront the reality of unchecked appetite.
Exactly. So what does this all mean for us right now? It means that Jonson's specific brand of vital realism, his whole formulation of the comedy of humors, hasn't aged out of relevance at all.
Not even a little bit.
The aesthetic may be rooted in Jacobean Venice, but the psychological mechanisms he identified are entirely recognizable. Volpone isn't just a dusty old play. It demands that we examine the systems we participate in, the wealth we venerate, and the parts of our own humanity we are willing to suppress to attain it. It's a mirror reflecting how easily ambition can twist us into vultures and crows if we aren't paying attention.
It really makes you look at your own behavior.
It does, and that leads to a final thought I want you to consider. Look at the architecture of our modern digital lives. Think about social media algorithms and reality television ecosystems. They are expressly designed to identify, isolate, and reward our most extreme, exaggerated character traits in exchange for attention and financial gain.
That is such a good point.
Right. If Ben Jonson were alive today, observing us, would he view the modern influencer economy, where individuals intentionally flatten their own personalities into singular, marketable obsessions, would he see that as the ultimate, terrifying triumph of his comedy of humors? Are our digital profiles just the modern equivalent of being defined by one single, imbalanced humor? Are we actively reducing ourselves to vultures and foxes, willingly stepping into the sick room, all for the promise of a digital inheritance? Something to mull over. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. It is always a privilege to explore the brilliant, uncompromising mind of a writer like Ben Jonson. Keep analyzing the narratives around you, and we will catch you next time.